Good morning, Thursday, May 22nd, 2025, here in House Transportation. And this morning, we're going to, just after the excitement here in the State House and the delay of the evacuation and everybody's returned safely, Logan Newberry from Joint Fiscal is here. The April stats and revenue pictures have come out, and we're going to update the committee and where our transportation revenues are, where they've been trending for the year to date and budget year to date and all of that piece, and then a little bit of breakdown from there. We took a simple testimony last month, and I want to make sure everybody's aware of where we're at, headed into hopefully adjournment soon.
Totally blocked out by those flowers.
Yeah.
Those are strategically placed.
That's me.
I know you like your privacy.
It's like a nature thing going on over here.
Tim looks like he's off in the Berkshires somewhere. Got that Wilson thing going.
It's all Wilson. It's all yours, Logan.
All right, so for the record, Logan Newberry with the Joint Fiscal Office. Walk you through the April revenue. As a reminder, all of these are on the JFO website. They're updated every month. Show you from the main page. Fiscal. Subjects. Very bottom, transportation. Monthly data. The first four are this latest month's updated. The summary is probably. See this. Okay. This is the summary of the April collections. The first box there in the top left, this is our sort of monthly versus the targets. Starting on the left-hand side, you have our 5 main revenue categories. Actuals is what we brought in this month. Target is what the forecast estimated we would bring in. And then you can see the versus target and then the percentage. You'll see this month we were pretty much right on target. Total, we came in about $100,000 over, which for the scale we're at is essentially right on target, less than 0.5% above. Shifting to the right there, the cumulative year to date, this looks at all the revenue up to today, or I guess up to last month. We are still below our target for the year to date. You see here at almost -1%. You remember last month we had pretty significant shortfall against target. This month we weren't below, but we didn't make up that shortfall, so we are still 0.9% below, or $2.2 million. In the grand scheme of things, a 1% difference from target isn't that bad. Ideally, we'd like to be above target, but given the variability, this isn't horrible, but it is something that we want to sort of keep an eye on and make sure it doesn't continue to grow.
Yeah, thanks. When maybe you could say, like, who develops the target?
Sure.
And is it, do they try to be a little conservative, or do they just say, this is exactly where we think it's going to land?
Sure. So I can answer the first one. So this is the forecast revenue that is adopted by the e-board in January and then in July of every year.
Oh, boy, is that the
Might be.
Everybody's waiting on it. I was just taking pictures. I was taking pictures of the committee. That was a flash. Well, not a.
So every six months,
Check on that.
the
I
legislation,
guess we're good.
they adopt a consensus forecast, which is created by Jeff Carr, who works for the agency, and then Tom Cavett, who works for the legislators, and those two sort of get together and they come up with what they think is going to be the forecast for the next 6 months. that is adopted, and then those are the numbers that you see here. As to whether they try to be conservative or not, I don't know that I can speak to that. I think they try to be as accurate as possible. But, you know, given the sort of all the things they have to take into account to come up with these numbers, there is some sort of variation, sort of expected. I think if we're within 1% of the numbers they expected, that's a fairly decent forecast. Again, we'd like it to be above what they estimated, but you know, there are things that we can't control. So that's the transportation fund revenues.
I have a question there on the
Yeah,
5.1% over the right-hand corner, that is it is a five, so months over year, we're up 5.
yeah. So looking back,
Even if we're slightly, so the expectation we would grow 6, we're up 5.1.
yes, so these numbers, the versus target numbers here are against the revenue forecast that was adopted in January. And then those numbers will be updated again in July. So this number will change. So we're always looking back towards the last forecast that's adopted. But when you look at year over year for the 12 months whole, we are still growing. So there's sort of two different things being shown here. Year over year, the T fund is still growing. Last 12 months, it's grown by 5.1%, mainly because of the fees here. You'll see I have a forecast chart that we can look at. The sort of 5-year compound annual growth rate for the T fund as a whole going out to 2030 is only looking at like 1.22%, barring any other changes to fees or revenue that this body might make. But over the last 12 months, we have been growing by 5% against the target, which was increased in January. We are down about 1%.
Which your budget is built on, so theoretically, if it ended, we'd be making some cuts. Or they'd have to make those.
There'd be some, yes, some reversions or something would take place to sort of balance that out.
And if we did hear some testimony that nationwide motor vehicle purchase and use tax saw a pretty significant increase in the March, April area, because there was a whole lot of pre-tariff buying. It was a pretty big uptick in the motor vehicle arena, but we didn't see that. And I guess this reflects that.
We haven't seen that yet. Whether that is lagged here in the state and we'll see it in the next month or the future months is unknown yet, or we might not have received as much as a bump as maybe nationally. I don't know yet. That'll be a question for the future months to see. The other thing to remember is come end of the year is when we have sort of the big true up and all the finalized numbers come out. June is often, you'll see some significant change, some big increases or decreases as the sort of year-end numbers are finalized and we get the whole picture. There is some sort of variation and lag from month to month as collections maybe come in a bunch one month, a little bit of the next month, and then in June we sort of see the whole picture and we get the revenues. So it's really hard to say, unless you're seeing a large increase or a really large decrease, what the year end will actually come to until we sort of have all the numbers fleshed out.
Is there a certain threshold that, let's say we're in, negative and we got that JTOC has to sign off on it as opposed to the Secretary of AOT, his authority? Is it, what's that threshold?
There is, I don't remember the threshold off top of my head. I know there is some language that speculates. I don't know. Damien happens to know the thresholds for when the legislature has to get involved, but I do know that's in statute that we can to get that
There's a
information.
certain number, yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking about for the call back,
Yeah, if revenues are below a certain amount, so you're not
1%.
1%.
Yeah, it's a 1% drop in general fund revenues or T fund revenues or.
So we're hovering right almost right around there, then, yeah. So we would have to make that decision as opposed to the Secretary
So- What happens is the joint fiscal committee gets a revenue reduction plan or expenditure reduction plan to address the reduced revenues, and they vote to approve it. You have language in your T-bill where if it goes above 4%, they'll have to come into JTOC to identify specific projects, but it's not the same review and approval process, it's just a review process.
Okay.
But they do have to provide updates on revenues under the T-bill.
Okay, and then the tip fund, sort of a similar picture, but a smaller revenue sources into that. Tip fund was up 2.3%, about $30,000 for the month. Total cumulative year to date, we're up about 1%. But the 12-month year to year for the TIB is declining and has been because it is tied to gas and diesel purchases, which, as we know, have been steadily decreasing for a while now. That's the summary. I'm happy to there's some other documents if you want to get deep into the details of actual collections and all that sort of stuff. Or if there are any other questions, we can answer them. Again, all of these are on the JFO website if you want to peruse them.
Well, one of the things that the committee, I think, that as we head into next year and look at, I know that the DMV, in particular, looking at motor vehicle fees, the DMV is going through changes in leadership. They're going through changes with the MOD Act, and they do continuously tell us that they'll have better information as we go forward. We passed a 20% increase in fees, and we're only showing a 9.5% increase in those fees. And they should be.
Showing a 9 today. So I'd have to get the, let me actually show you. If you want to get in, if you want to get into this, all right. So back on this JFO website, if you look at the transportation revenue details, this is we'll download the whole spreadsheet that I think I showed last time I came in. I don't know, I might have to reshare actually.
I just believe there's a revenue.
So within this document, if you go to this running tab, this will show you for the 12-month sum and sort of the running totals for all these different revenue sources. So if we come down here to the DMV fees, you see in January, if we go January 2025 to January 2024, which I believe these went into place January 2024, if I'm running my times right, we did see about a 17% increase over what they were the year prior. The increase you're seeing, the 9.5 isn't looking at sort of before fees were increased to a year after fees were increased. It's looking from 3 months after fees were increased. So it is decreased a little. So, and I don't want to say all of this increase was due solely to the fee increase, because there is also some probably natural growth and some variations that can come in there. But we did see a sort of bump in the months post increase of those fees, as you might expect, because people are paying more money. So right prior, say January 2024, we were bringing in $87 million. That's a 12-month sum. And then January 25, we're up to about 102 or 103 the month before. So that's maybe a better way to look at those fees. And you can do this with any of the revenue sources if you're interested, and see what they look like throughout time. And this data goes back many years, back to the early 2000s, if you want to go back and look at all of that stuff.
386 lines.
Yeah, so it goes a ways back.
Logan, can you just remind me, where on the JFO website?
Yeah.
I would find that? Is it under publications or is it?
It's under, so if you go to subject, if you're on the main JFO webpage,
Yep.
you go to subjects, then at the very bottom, there's transportation.
Yep,
And then you scroll down a little bit, there should be under monthly data.
okay,
Um,
got it.
there'll be 3 that says April and then 1 from March, and that's the gasoline sales because that data is lagged a month. Compared to the rest, so,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? I guess what I would say is that what we're gonna look at them as we are gone for all of the months that we're in between, but it certainly sets us up for sort of the segue of where our revenues are at and where we are looking at. One of our big goals for the whole session has been, what are the T-fund revenues? Where are they at? And where are we headed? And then obviously the huge projected, the 1% projected growth rate in T-fund revenues with the continued increase in construction costs and the sort of locked in fixed costs, and whether or not we do have sort of this match money challenge that's the number of $20 and $30 million per year moving ahead. That is still the reality of where we're at, and we don't know where we're going month to month or year by year fee base. So when we look at what are we facing next year, that sort of drives the question that I was hoping to start putting together for our end of the year. If we are still believe that T-funds and protecting the T-funds are and growing the T-funds are a big part of our mission here in House Transportation Committee. When I asked Damon to come in and talk about or to help us with the potential of whether the committee or some version of it was willing to move in a direction of what should we be asking perhaps as the budget for next year gets drafted for transportation? What should we be asking for policy wise that we would want the agency to look at when it drafts its policy portion for next year? But particularly in the budget arena, it seems that conversations can make them as simple or not. We either have to find a way to continue like we did this year with keeping the JTOC money in transportation and the theme of let transportation pay for transportation and look at that huge purchase and use tax transfer that goes out, or that increase in DMV fees without it. Imagine the picture we would be in. So is it other revenue or is it keep transportation money in transportation to face where we're headed? Those are the things that I was looking at trying to get from the committee over the next week before if the German is the 30th. Do we want to put something to the agency or the governor that says as you build next year's budget, this is what our House Transportation Committee would like you to consider. We may not be able to agree on everything to put in the letter, so we may or may not be able to get where that is, but either let transportation pay for transportation and we suggest a cap and or a reduction on the property or the motor vehicle use purchase and use tax, or we have to ask them to consider some level of revenue increase, which is in 9-year history, the governor has been very clearly against. So that was sort of what this agenda, as we transition to Logan's still in the room because it's a money related issue and Damien's here in the room as well. That's what I'm sort of trying to throw out to I've mentioned a few different times. That's what this kind of committee time is to talk about. I have a pretty clear idea what I think we should do. I don't know if it's something that just the chair wants to write the letter or if the committee wants to write the letter, I guess. If anybody wants to comment on that, but we are facing flat revenues, federal match gap that we've seen from the agency that could be in the number of, correct me if I'm wrong, that's $20 million and then it's headed to $30 million. We left a few $100,000 on the budget for next year, that 1.1 million, and then we only spent 700,000 of it. So, we got 400 grand, but 400 doesn't compare to 20 million. So that's the conversation I'm looking to have. Representative Burke?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, it's sort of like a Richard Snelling moment. We need to increase revenue. And that's something that has been very hard to do. So we need to make a case to the governor that there has to be some kind of, combination or, you know, we talked about delivery tax, we talked, that's not even gonna bring in that much, but just what can we do comprehensively? That's responsible, you know, otherwise we're gonna see the Canadian budget go down, we're gonna see the transit, I mean, you know, can we stand by there and say, well, we can't do anything? I think there are ways that not gonna hurt the poorest people that will help. That's why the gas tax is not necessarily, I don't think, the best vehicle, but I'm on board with you.
We should, Representative White?
Chair, can you just clarify when we should be getting that letter to the governor before we adjourn or
Well, I guess
early in next session?
they start drafting sometime in the fall. I was looking at it in terms of, this is the time we're together. As far as what we might agree in general theory, we may be able to have it drafted after we leave, but it's a lot easier for us to get to some level of feedback. And if I can use this time we won't decide it right now, but that will help drive the conversation this last week of what everybody comes to. And if it may not be the exact last thing we do, but if it's the next biggest piece that we at least have come to some level of agreement on or whatnot. And it's either a reduction in the transfer of the person use tax or an increase in revenues or some combination of both is that's just what I think, but I don't know if that's what the committee thinks. So my time answer is we'd have to certainly have it done by the summer. But as far as being able to talk about it and really speak as a committee, if we want to, we've got this week and a half to kind of drive that. And the floor schedules are all crazy and we have a lot of flexible time to drive those conversations while we're here. So we don't have to do this. We have an opportunity to do it.
Yeah.
And we have a time frame that we have a week and a half of very open agenda because of the way that sessions end. There'll be potentially nights that we're here until 9, 10, 11 o'clock. Let's hope not, but we were last year. We have other times that we're sitting around during that time waiting for committees to act on bills. Anyway, so this is a time to work it out, but we don't have to have it fully drafted until, I would say, certainly by the end of the fiscal year, right? That would be the time. Maybe Logan would have a comment or Damien on the time frame that's best.
I think they generally try to keep wrapping up or working on their budgets for next year in around the September mark. So earlier is probably better, so they have more time to read and take into account the things you say, but also it's largely up to you all when you want to send it to them.
Just further on that. So, I mean, I do think we discussed a couple of different revenue generating ideas earlier in the session, as Representative Burke referred to, the delivery tax was one of them. So raising revenues is part of the conversation that we could also talk about cost cutting as well. I don't know if that's something that's to be considered.
Representative Wells, then Representative Hughes.
I was trying to think of ways that we could generate more cash, and I was thinking maybe we could put together a massive tariff on electric oval cars, and if they're white, double the tariff.
You might be squeezing water out of a rock.
Just a thought.
Well, not trying to, anyway, well, one comment is the money that goes to the ed fund. I've always thought that because T-fund dollars have multipliers of 9 or 5, or can be combinations of, if we took the $50 million or so that goes from the purchase and use tax into the education fund, and over time, I get that people want to be sensitive to education, but maybe we take, I don't know, $10 million over 5 years and reduce that amount. I mean, if we took $10 million and transferred it back into the T fund, that would be almost $100 million you could put towards paving. I mean, that would be almost last year's budget of paving. So anyway, my suggestion is that maybe we ought to take a look at taking a 5-year plan and reducing the 10 million every year to take the purchase and use tax back into the T fund.
Representative Thomas.
Could someone explain the multiplier effect again? Is that
State federal match.
But what all does that apply to? Does it apply to anything in the budget or only certain like, it would be
Well,
helpful to
not-
understand.
Pretty much, I mean, our only pure state are your town programs, I think some transportation buildings are all state. Maintenance, yeah,
Snow plow.
maintenance,
Maintenance
but
is
everything
not-
else has federal dollars. And it's, you're drawn down, so it's usually 80-20, 90-10, 95-5,
I think it averages about 17%.
Yeah. So,
It's most projects within, especially within sort of what we would consider maybe the core V-Trans programs. That's if you look at your budget on the page, the first half have some sort of federal dollars tied to them. That's over the if you have $100 million project, right, we would pay for about 20 million and the feds would pay for the other 80. That's what the multiplier is being referred to as.
But that varies based on.
It does vary based on programs, and if it's like on the interstate system, we only pay 10%. And there's some other programs, again, I think it averages about 17% comes from the state. And not every program within programs, especially within like the paving budget, it sort of depends on where the program's happening, and all these things are sort of decided at the agency, and they work with the federal DOT to sort of determine what our federal share will be as they present the budget. But, yeah.
Did that help?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, I think if we were to put together a letter, I mean, start at big picture, like, here's the hole we're going into. Show that. And then, look at two options, which could be a combination of both, and that's the piece that goes to the ed fund. And, float that and put it out there. Is this ever gonna change or not? Because it's not up to us to decide. All we can do is put it out there. And so, and then, offer some other ways to fill the hole too, with the thought that, hey, it could be a combination of both. But, I think it's sort of big picture. We're looking at this hole and we gotta get there. And, here are the opportunities to help patch it. And if we just put those on a page, then when we come back, we can look. They're gonna still be there facing us, next January. So.
I think that part of what I hear you saying, part of what we can decide and not decide is in this committee, but it's a continuation of our education effort to the rest of the body. There was a huge education effort, particularly to the appropriations this year, really spent a lot of time to understand the transportation issues. They spent a ton of time back, if you think of back in March when we were passed out the bill. This letter, we would certainly copy into Ways and Means and appropriations, probably to the body or something, so that those that were interested in it would, so we have to keep it high level as you're suggesting, and maybe there's some bullet points that get into some of the more technical things we want them to work on or come to us with, but we need to continue that education to the rest of the members of the whole that we're in, as well the education conversation is going on. So I guess I agree with where you're going, and also saying we are continuing that education effort, that we're in this hole. And so although I know the Secretary of Transportation and the governor are well aware of that hole, the members and whatnot aren't all necessarily aware of that. And the other committees have plenty of other priorities. This would be one part of our way of continuing educating what we're up against.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my 2 cents would be, if to get my name on it, I would want a structure where we're offsetting the lost revenue. I don't think we should be increasing the revenue, but we should get outside the box of the 3 things that bring in the revenue and see if there's anything else, whether it's delivery fee or something else that's in the general fund that we can go after, but it's gonna have to be offset by lower gas tax or anything like that, so make it revenue neutral, but it has a higher upside, has a higher, brighter future. And you could also mention the fact that 25% roughly of our gas tax, we need to take a serious look at how to recoup that, because with EVs, we're just going after, obviously, people that live in the state. And we're not capturing that 25% that's lost, so is there something that we can, I'll say, get towards, but, I mean, is there another avenue that we could sort of make that up with another fee or tax on people coming into the state, whatever that might be, but I would sort of address it like that, saying that we need to increase this by X amount. I think it has to be revenue neutral, but it has a higher, greater upside than the current three things that we have now. So, yeah. But anyways.
That's why we're here. Talk a little bit about what it's for everybody to be willing to sign it. It would have to work or not. And so that does keep it somewhat general. I would, I don't want to shut down if somebody else has got any comment on any of. I don't know if previous committees have done this or not. I don't believe that we did as a committee last year, but I don't recall. And we don't have to, but you know, I am a believer that continuing to educate on our struggle is important, but I also think that maybe if there's no more comments on the money or just another part of the conversation, it's pretty clear there's a lot of member interest in our inspection process, both in the committee and out in the membership. And we do have Representative Noyes will be presenting an amendment on the moving inspections to every other year. The Lieutenant Governor is big on affordability and talked a bit about the inspection piece. There's always multiple pieces up there. It's not entirely clear what our goal is in terms of, to me anyway, in terms of whether it is where safety's at versus enforcement versus all of the issues that come up in miscellaneous motor vehicles. I don't know if we want to ask them to be prepared next year to dig deeper into this subject or not. I'm not sure if that's in a letter. It's probably separate. He's going to present it on the floor. He has not confirmed whether he's.
We have language looking at the.
Yeah, it's every 2 years.
Oh, I thought you were asking in a minute.
It seems like we, should take some testimony on it for next year. We're gonna get a report from the DMV saying, sort of giving us a little more information about it because other than hearing some ideas, we haven't really dug into, what's the safety implications? We don't know that. We're just making assumptions. And so, it seems like we should dig into it next year.
I feel like we're making a commitment that we have to.
Yeah.
I think we do.
Just a couple comments. On the inspections, I feel like we put language in the DMV bill that is moving that issue forward anyway.
Yeah.
And as Representative Couch said, we will be informed when we come back in January and be able to take that up. And that's obviously addressing affordability for Vermonters and which is critical. But also by hitting affordability for Vermonters, we may be looking at a decrease in revenue to the transportation fund if we go to every 2 years. So I just feel strongly that we should be looking at, potential revenue generating ideas that make sense, as well as maybe some cost cutting. Whether we look at or ask the agency to look at a 1 or 2% cut. Affordability is important, revenue is important, but also, I think we should always be looking at what our expenses are and, is there any cutting to be had there? So a letter that kind of addresses some of our revenue generating ideas, some cost cutting ideas, and some affordability issues we're committed to tackling, I think would be beneficial. Yeah.
Just sort of follow up on the inspection. I think it's $15. It's a small amount that goes to DMV. I don't think we've gotten any information as to whether it could actually cost the state money to run the program, because they got to run the program. They got people, that's what they do, and deal with problems about it. So I'm not sure the money coming in necessarily covers the program. It might be that it actually costs the state money, that the money that's brought in is not covering the costs. I don't know.
Representative Wells, you're up next.
When was the last time we raised the gas tax and how much did we raise it?
Logan,
Off the top of my head, I believe 2014.
Okay.
How much? I couldn't tell you. I'd have to go back and look.
I, yeah, I have that in my office. I can get that info.
I'll send it to you.
Logan probably does too.
Did you take a wild guess?
No.
He's an analyst, not a
Let me see if I can find it real quick.
So,
Representative Keezy?
yeah, so to the point of moving the inspection out every 2 years, and affordability versus safety, that's an issue that surrounds that right there. And frankly, at $15, I don't know if it really is an affordability issue, whether it's a convenience issue. With the people, with the proponents, and also if you move it out 2 years, I'm wondering how that would handicap the the mileage-based user fee. But there might, with Representative Cochran's idea, if you you might have some, you're going to move it out 2 years, you're going to, but then maybe what there would be is some other adjustments to like a delivery fee that you trade it off, that type of. So I see a way forward, but I really do not like going to 2 years. And it's just a personal opinion, and it's an opinion, not a fact-based thought.
Representative Tomlinson, then we'll come back to Representative Lowe.
So clarifying question, were you, Chair, suggesting that we include something around the inspections in the letter potentially, or just tee that up for more discussion next year? Or was the letter intended to be more focused on the revenue issue, like T-fund issue?
It can go in a number of ways. I was potentially of the mindset, I think we made it a commitment to members within the body that we got to take a more serious look at the inspection, affordability and safety piece. And that also, we always get these pieces, but it doesn't seem that there's a guarantee of review of inspection. So the letter goes to the body as much as it does to the Secretary of Transportation. I want to make sure there's sort of a chance to let the body know to confirm those promises that we've made this session, but it doesn't have to. It can, and again, I think I heard Representative Corcoran say, we want signature of everybody. It's going to have to be, have circle to it, I guess, to everybody to be willing to put their name on it.
Yeah, I think my inclination would be to focus the letter on our revenue gap challenges and just putting it on the table, different opportunities that we see, whether it's around the ed fund or additional revenue sources, rather than naming specific ones or trying to suggest that we have an answer to that, but just making sure people are really aware of this challenge and perhaps beginning to open the appetite for considering some of those steps. So yeah, I think it's important for us to consider the inspections questions, but I don't know that it makes sense to me to include that in the letter at this time.
Okay, well,
How much do we get out of that $15 for inspection?
I believe it's $8.
$8, there's 500,000 vehicles registered in their state, so times 8. That's quite a bit of money. What's that?
I can look that up for you as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
He dealt with his proposal, just double that. So we.
okay,
That's the.
Right.
yeah.
Well, just one clarification on the inspections. I think the affordability issue isn't the fee for the inspections. It's that you
Right.
can't drive your car without paying $500,
$1,200, turn that light off.
$1,200, et cetera, dollars. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, just to,
Well, and I think on the affordability, sorry.
yes, you want to.
On the affordability, it's not, it's like $75 you do to get inspected. It's taking time off from work. It's, all those things. So,
So we're coming up on our 10:30 and our next witnesses have arrived. We are here for another week minimum, week and a day. And we have pretty flexible, we have a lot of, like I said, the floor is a moving target moving forward. I'd like to have the committee drive the conversations amongst themselves and to me and what you think we should or shouldn't do and whether you're willing to want to sign a letter of such sort. And I think we can then kind of convey that to our ledge counsel and put that together. He's heard the piece. I know the agency is listening to what we're saying as well. They may have influence to that, but we want to emphasize that we want to educate the entire body of what we're up against on transportation funds. Representative Burke, I'm done.
Have an announcement
Oh,
or presentation. So, for Logan and Damien, who had little
Thank you.
Thank you.
things of our appreciation.
Thank you for all your support and help this year.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
It doesn't mean you're done. The DMV bill's not passed.
Take it and go.
Hopefully see you next year.
And before you leave, would you pass the donuts to the center of the table?
We're not live.
Right, yeah, this is our priority of what we're.
Thanks, guys.
Have those flowers been here all year or just today?
Been here all year?
That sounds like.
You must have a real green thumb.
Senator White.
Yeah.
These are all they've been using for
Maple,
growing, right?
vanilla, and the classic Boston cream.
Thank you.
0 calories,
So, I
everyone.
don't know, Steve, you're going first. It's,
Yeah.
okay, so I'll try to,
Hey, please.
while we're having our,
Come on in, which one?
morning snack together and celebrating our JFO and Ledge Council if they left the room.
I saw that.
Boston cream.
You're welcome to join the table, have a donut if you haven't already. Here you go.
People.
Oh, you need another Ooh, look at that one. Right on line. Tim, you want a donut? No?
You good?
He's laughing on the outside, crying on the inside. You're hidden by the flower. You're hidden by the
Pass them
flower.
around if you want.
Okay.
Right here.
So when we, I guess, let me say if I can try to get this correctly where I go along and whatnot. We have electric vehicle chargers out in the world that have level 1, level 2, level 3. The Agency of Agriculture has responsibility currently out in the gasoline world, diesel world. On every pump you go to, it's certified that it has been inspected, that you're guaranteed you're getting a gallon of gas out of that pump. And there's an entire program around that. And a while back, we heard testimony about that maybe in previous years. But as far as the public expectation going forward, that if they are to pull up to a charger and purchase electricity, that there's an expectation that you're going to know there's a kilowatt hour coming out that you're paying for. My understanding is there's somewhere in the apps and with that vehicle, it sort of tells you how many kilowatt hours you got. But as a state, that the expectation was back when programs were first being set up, that the chargers would be measured and tested in a similar way to, in effect, the way gasoline is distributed today. My understanding is that the agency has been moving along in this direction, and the equipment is a technology issue in and of itself. What we're looking for today, and a follow-up to the work that we do through the funding through ACCD, the work that we've got with public chargers out there. I know that you have a whole responsibility area in that, and we're looking to at least to start as sort of an update what the requirements are, where you're at, and what you've got moving forward. So this is a part of our responsibility as an overview to go back and see what's being done on the things we've asked to be done. So thank you very much for joining us. And I guess at this point, we'll hand it off to you. If you didn't get a donut, our apologies.
I'm really holding out for the applause at the end. So good morning. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of the committee, for having us in. Steve Collier, I'm General Counsel of the Agency of Agriculture. And in a moment, you'll hear from Scott Dolan, who actually knows what he's talking about as he implements the program. But the agency, as the chair just indicated, has a consumer protection function, and that's what our function is in this realm. we are the ones who essentially are trying to ensure that nobody's putting their thumb on the proverbial scale when they're selling things. So we have a weights and measures section that inspects gas pumps, it inspects oil, propane trucks and oil and propane trucks. It inspects the retail scanners when you check out of your stores. It inspects the deli scales. We have this whole function to ensure that consumers are getting what they pay for. So we've been doing that for a long time. The electric vehicle world is obviously pretty new. One of the real challenges in any of this kind of work is that you want to set national standards, not state by state standards, because when you're selling these equipment scales or the gas pump meters or whatever you may be selling, and you've got 50 different standards in 50 different states, you've got a mess. So we not only apply Vermont law, we apply the national standards, and we're part of the national conference on the Committee of Weights and Measures, and they develop handbook standards under the NIST is the acronym for those standards, and we apply those. Those have been developing in recent years for electric vehicle supply equipment. For many years, electric vehicle supply equipment none of it's really been effectively regulated yet, but it's been developed without those standards in place, and they weren't national standards until quite recently. So I think it was in January 1st, 2022, when the national standards were adopted for the level 2 chargers, which are the slow ones. So those standards were just applied, and I think it was January 1st of this year, but it may have been last year when the level 3, which are the DC fast chargers, were first adopted. So we've been building out the program. It's not something that we did before, but we do, as the chair indicated, we do want consumers, when they go to an electric vehicle supply equipment and charge their car, we do want them to get what they pay for, just the same way that they do when they go to the gas pump. So we didn't have a program for this. There's pretty expensive equipment you need to even be able to test the efficacy of the meters. So I think it was in the 2023 session when we asked the legislature for a position and for funding to be able to purchase the level 2 charging equipment. So we did that. And last year in 2024, so we have a person now who's responsible for carrying out this work. And we also bought the level 2 charging equipment, which I think was about $110,000. And we have that equipment. And last summer we started finding the group of people who were selling this, and we started inspecting it. And so Mr. Dolan will talk to you a little bit more about what we did with that. The standards for level 2 were enacted nationally before the standards for level 3. Those standards are now in place. We do not yet have the level 3, the DC fast charger equipment. We're talking to BGS. We did set aside the money from our own budget to do that, and we're in the process of purchasing. We don't have the RFP out yet. It might actually even be a sole source. But we are in the process of purchasing that equipment. We expect to have it this summer. And then we will also begin the process of licensing and testing that equipment. I should have said that everybody who has an electric vehicle supply equipment that's available to the public is supposed to have a license with us. And part of that requires the annual testing. And what we're looking for is that you're charging by the kilowatt hour, which is required, that you're charging accurately for the kilowatt hour. And if you have any additional charge, you're clearly stating what that is, like a parking charge or a fee. So those are the essential things that we are looking for. We're also, part of what we wanted to do was to get a better understanding of the efficacy of the equipment that's that's being used right now. And we're an education first enforcement agency. We want compliance. We're not as interested in bringing the hammer down unless we need to, but we do want and take very seriously our role of making sure that people are getting what they pay for. And we weren't exactly sure what we would find, and Scott will tell you a bit more about that. But one thing we don't want to do at this earliest juncture, because there's been such a push to get the infrastructure so people can actually go to electric vehicles, we don't want to take equipment out of service that's accurate. So there's a whole standard that's also now in place, which is called National Type Evaluation, which is something that was adopted last session. And that has very technical specifications of the type of equipment that will meet the standards. And if you fit within that National Type Evaluation standard, then your equipment is going to meet the standards because of that. There's a lot of equipment out there that's not going to meet those standards because those standards are new. we don't want to take that equipment out of service if it's accurate. If it's not accurate, that's a different issue. But we've been trying to get control of that landscape and also see what the issues are. And there are some real issues that I think probably you will all want to address it at some point. And we still haven't even licensed everybody, and we haven't even tested any of the level 3 stages yet. So this regulatory program is still in its infancy. But one thing we're seeing that's really pretty notable, and I actually brought the definition for you all just to hand out because if you want to see it, it's a short definition, but the key definition in all of this is electric vehicle service equipment that's available to the public. And that definition is arguably broad enough to drive a great big electric bus right through it. It's a second definition. It says electric vehicle supply equipment, and then at the bottom of that first paragraph, it says electric vehicle supply equipment available to the public.
Come on.
Okay.
I think if you,
Where were you pointing to? I'm sorry.
so just, it's 2A, definition 2A. If you just look at that is what we are regulating right now is equipment that's available to the public. And that's where we are, and that's fine. We don't, it's a little difficult to regulate because essentially the exceptions are very broad, including that a business can service its customers. And if they do that, that's quote unquote not available to the public. So as an example, I don't know how many of you have been to Costco, but their gas pumps are quite busy at Costco. If they set up, arguably right now, Costco could set up electric vehicle chargers, make them only available to their customers, and we wouldn't be able to regulate them, which is a policy question that I think probably warrants some consideration, because Costco, if they did that, would likely be one of the biggest sellers of electricity to cars in the state, and we wouldn't be regulating it. So it's maybe not appropriate that we're regulating mom and pop electric vehicle supply equipment, but not Costco. But yeah.
So are you saying that now at the Costco pumps, you don't go there and check them?
The gas pumps we do, because it's a whole different standard. It's just that with this.
The way this is written,
Correct.
it says, hey, if in that situation, this isn't written that would allow you to.
Right. And I don't know the history of this definition and why it was drafted exactly the way that it was. I assume that the impetus was to try to get out as much equipment into the field as possible. And if businesses wanted to be able to provide it to their customers, probably gratis, or to provide it to their employees, I think the idea was let's get it out in the field, which makes perfect sense. But when you're looking at this exception now, it also includes a group of drivers. So arguably, Tesla could put out its chargers, make them only available to members of a group of drivers, of Tesla drivers, and we wouldn't have the authority to regulate it. Again, it's not that's implausible, but it's probably not what anyone thinks is the best way to go forward.
Representative Burke?
Yeah, I think there's some dealerships that actually have a charger, but it's only available to customers. You would not be regulated.
That's exactly right. There's a lot of, in our opinion, there's a lot of gray area currently in the available to the public. And so part of what we've been grappling with is, and my advice currently is if you are not making it available to everyone, then we don't regulate you. We have to make sure that people aren't trying to skirt the rules by, not being regulated by just putting it out on the street and saying, oh, we didn't know anyone was going to use it. But if people have it in their own parking area and they have signage that say not for anyone else's use, this is for employees only, then it's arguably not available to the public. So that's just we haven't had this discussion, even fully within our agency. We need to talk to other agencies. We need to talk to the administration. We need to talk to all of you. But it seems to us like a pretty big loophole that the only question wouldn't be about volume at all. It would just be whether you restrict access to a huge group of people or not. So that's one issue. Yeah, sorry.
Representative Couch and Representative Wells.
Yeah, it seems like it, it could be adjusted just by saying, if you're charging money, then it seems like, you might be now into the system.
You're absolutely right. And the normal standard for our work is commercial. We only regulate commercial weighing and measuring devices. So normally when you're selling something, you have to be licensed and regulated by us. This was just drafted differently. Again, I don't know the background, but it does seem to create some pretty big pitfalls if the goal is to protect all consumers who are purchasing electricity for their vehicles. The other sort of big potential loophole is that we currently don't have jurisdiction over electric vehicle supply equipment that's sold directly by a public utility, because that's under the Public Utility Commission. And so again, you could have Green Mountain Power putting out electric vehicle supply equipment, and it's not being regulated by us. And that's a conversation we've initiated with the Department of Public Service. Again, we don't have any positions on, but arguably if they were doing it themselves, that might be one thing. But if no one is inspecting that equipment, then you've got different equipment out there with different levels of reliability, which maybe isn't the perfect system. So I think from our perspective, those two things are kind of big ticket items that we ought to be thinking about. Do we want to do this uniformly, throughout the state and make sure that all equipment that's selling to the public is being treated the same? Or do we want to have exceptions for whatever reasons those may be? And we don't even have the level 3 equipment yet, and the public utility companies are likely to be using DC fast chargers. It's not something that we've considered urgent, but it's something that when we're building the system, we think is ripe for discussion.
Representative Wells, or are you done? I'm sorry.
No, yeah, it's just sort of, now, my understanding is we don't regulate electric meters this state.
On homes, you mean, or?
Yes.
Well, they are, again, part of public utilities, yes, we certainly don't.
We measure them.
I don't think,
They're just, I guess, certified. And then I was gonna say, there's out there sort of floating the fact that if we have public chargers, we may want to tax, like a gas tax, or particularly out-of-staters maybe. So it feels like we've got to get the system regulated in some way and trusted to even consider those future steps.
Yeah, understood. That's a good point.
Representative Wells.
Yeah, so say a grant is provided for a town clerk in Westmore and he gets 2 level 2 charging stations. Anybody in that public can use them. You're going to regulate those because it's public.
They're available to the public, yeah.
And do the town clerk or the town of Westmore get any money out of this whole transaction?
You mean, do we give them a kickback?
Yeah. No, I just wondered if they asked me last night in Westmore if where the money from those goes, because it would be off their grid or their Orleans Electric there as far as that goes.
No, they have to pay us to get a license, which is $25 per plug. And then we test them, and if it's not accurate, then we can regulate to ensure that it's either accurate or decommissioned, but
the fee that they'll pay,
we try not to give money to anyone.
yeah, I see that. The cost that the person who comes in with their electric car and plugs it in, there's a certain fee there. Who gets that money? You guys do?
No. That's whomever's providing it. So the town, I mean, if the town is, that would be up to the municipality about whether or not they're selling electricity. But, BGS has, I think it's BGS who has some charging stations here, and I believe we charge for those, but I don't know assume that money, I don't know if it goes into a special fund or what happens to it, but state usually can't get money without it being designated by you all.
Representative White.
So just a question. So level 2 charging, national standards have been set. Have you all been regulating public level 2s in Vermont?
We started last summer with actually getting people licensed and actually testing the equipment. Yes.
And have you found any issues where level 2s are not delivering the energy that they say they are delivering?
A little bit, and Scott's going to talk to you about that. So if you don't mind,
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll wait for that. Thank you.
Should I wait for Scott or not? In terms, you said it's 25, the license fee is $25 per plug?
Yes.
annually?
Yes.
And how many registered license holders that we have at this point?
I think we have 53 at this point.
Any idea how many there should be?
Not exactly. I think we've been to 167. Scott's going to give you these numbers too, but I think we've been to 167 locations, I believe, which is more, maybe 230 something devices, 167 locations, I think.
Just the level 2 at this point.
Level 2 only so far, correct. We haven't tried to license the level 3 because we can't test the equipment and we don't feel quite right about charging a fee and licensing them when we can't even verify the accuracy. So we will do that as soon as we'll have the equipment soon, but we haven't started that yet. And those regulations I think it was January 1st of this year, but it may have been January 1st of 2024 when the level 3 regulations were even adopted nationally.
Representative?
Just to clarify, so in order to do the inspections, your team needs to have that piece of equipment in their purview. So I'm just thinking about, we just visited that lovely new Agency of Transportation garage up in the St. Albans area, and they have several level 3 chargers on site. Is there a possibility of working with that agency, or does your department need your own piece? Because I understand those are quite expensive, the level 3 chargers.
Well, they have the equipment or they have the testing, because the equipment we're buying is the one that tests to
Okay,
make sure that.
Okay, so that's clear. Okay, I
Yeah.
didn't understand so you're buying equipment to test. You're not
Correct.
actually buying the equipment, the actual
Correct.
level 3 charger.
Correct. We're buying the
Thank you.
device that tests to make sure that the meters themselves are accurate.
Okay.
And I don't believe anyone else in the state has that equipment, at least that we know of. Yeah.
Thank you.
What is the cost of a level 3 charger?
The device to test it or the,
The device itself, the charger itself?
I don't know.
I've heard all kinds of numbers. I don't know.
So you've pointed out in the statutes, it's a little squishy.
Yeah.
Maybe, that the legislature should take a look at it and look at closing any loopholes that we might want to do. But you've now got the equipment for level 2. You're getting the equipment and have, well, in the process of getting the equipment, you have now the standards, national standards. Is there anything stopping you from moving forward with starting to test level 3s?
No, we are. We we don't have the equipment. As soon as we're in the contract process to buy the equipment. We expect to have that equipment this summer. And as soon as we have it, we'll be doing the same thing that we did last summer with level 2. We'll be expanding that
Yeah.
to level 3, and we're going back to the level 2 places. We're going back to those and continuing to find more. And a key is we've also licensed the people who do the installation of the devices, and they are telling us where they're putting them now.
Okay,
So that's very helpful in terms
for
of
level 3s.
for both.
Okay,
Yeah,
so you need a license then to do that
to install it, you need to
in a public space. Yeah.
correct. Maybe even not I'm not sure if it's only for a public space in terms of licensing for that function of installing.
So on the big picture, there's nothing stopping you right now from just continuing to move forward with level 2s and level 3s.
Correct.
But, at some point, you've pointed out maybe that we should look at the statutes to make sure they're covering what we want to cover.
Correct. And I would say there's nothing stopping us, and there is some real ambiguity in what exactly we're supposed to be regulating and not. If a business like Costco were to tell us, this is just for our customers, then I think right now we'd have to sit with that as long as they actually were only selling it to their customers. There's some other interesting cases where people may or may not want to make it available to the public. And so that's a little bit of a challenge when you don't know exactly who you should be regulating. But yes, we are moving forward, and those that are clearly available to the public, we are in the process of.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Would the template that you currently use to regulate a gas pump work with a electric application?
I don't think the licensing application is much different. I haven't seen it myself, but someone has to come to us, apply, you're right, annually, pay the fee, and then part of our work is to go out and inspect and make sure that it's accurate.
And then our definitions would be the same, so you'd be operating under the same set of definitions, so whatever it is. If you sell to the public, you must be licensed.
It'd be,
or something like that.
it would be easy to be more comprehensive if that's all what you want to do.
Right.
Yeah,
And that's what currently happens under existing law.
correct.
Yeah,
We currently, for other weights of measuring devices, we regulate commercial ones.
yes, you do.
Here it's different.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You said you want.
Scott knows a lot more than I do, so it'll be time to.
Those are your words, not mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks. No problem.
You've got a beg for.
Welcome. My name is Scott Dolan. I'm the Weights and Measures Specialist for the Agency of Agriculture. I sent over a PowerPoint this morning. I don't know if it made it over to you guys yet or not. So it's quick 4 slides. I'll just read out the stuff. It just has some basic information. So as Steve was saying, we got the equipment midsummer last year. We did 163 devices, and a device is kind of a unit of a thing, just like you can see out here. Some of them have more than 1 meter inside of them, so they require more than one test. So we did 237 meters. And we did 146 unique locations, right? And that's like a street address that we consider a location. The EVSE industry considers location something slightly differently, but we use a location by GPS, right? If you've got a parking lot full of them, like in Berlin at the Park and Ride, there are numerous different brands of chargers there. So though each one of those, the EVSE industry considers a different location. We consider that one location with all those chargers, although we haven't tested that one because all of those are level 3. In our testing, we found 8% of the devices were outside of the 2% allowed tolerance. In NIST Handbook 44, as Steve alluded to, that's where all the standards for these are. And those handbooks are evolving, just like everything else is with this industry. So each year, the handbooks do change little by little, not drastically, but there are certain changes that happen.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Are these handbooks a public thing or are they yours?
No, they're a national thing. So they are the National Council of Weights and Measures has a group of state representatives and industry. Anybody can propose changes to them. Those changes are talked about regionally. There's 4 regions that talk about the changes, and then they're voted on nationally by state representatives, such as my supervisor, Mark Paquette. And then every year they can be adopted or not adopted on the new standards.
So we're not using rulemaking.
No, these are national standards.
Standards of other, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you,
And
Representative.
NIST has, for level 2 anyways, has set a plus or minus 2%.
Yes, the 2% tolerance will apply to everything eventually. And it still sort of applies to the fast chargers as well. But there are some exemptions for chargers that were put in earlier because that equipment wasn't designed and or maybe built to meet the 2%. It may in fact meet the standard, but it wasn't designed to. So there are some exemptions built into it for legacy type equipment.
But going forward with the NIST standard now, there, anybody who installs, and is it already in our state statutes that said if I now am going to go install a level 3 or a level 2 for public use, it needs to meet the NIST standard?
Yeah, we adopt handbook 44 in total, right? So even the stuff there's some stuff in there that aren't very many we don't enforce, like it's out of our purview, weights and measures enforced, we adopt the book in whole. So as the book changes, we adopt the most recent edition, which makes it very easy for industry because then the standards are the same countrywide.
Thank you.
Okay, as I said, 8% of the devices were out of tolerance, 5% were giving away energy, 3% were keeping more than the 2%. The range of the errors was giving up to 6%, keeping up to 4%. So that's kind of what we saw of the 237 devices. The biggest issue we saw last year that and Steve kind of alluded to this too, is there's a standard for method of sale in energy, right? And that's typically the kilowatt hour. Like right when you're buying power at home, you're paying by the kilowatt hour, not by the time you are using power. That is not the case in every state. Some states, such as New Jersey and Connecticut, only public utilities can sell power. So in that case, those people selling power to customers for cars have to do it by time or some other fee. In Vermont, we also adopt Handbook 130, again, another similar type standard that we adopt it in whole, requires a sell by kilowatt hour. And we were finding a lot of meters that were either giving power away, but charging by time, right? In essence, charging $0 per kilowatt hour. It's a strange thing, but this is what we saw. and you'd have a time-based fee of like $2 or $3 an hour. The problem was those devices weren't providing what kilowatt hours there were. So the consumer couldn't make the comparison between the two types of devices, right? So that's one of the things. We think we have that mostly corrected. We reached out to ChargePoint, which is the largest provider in the state, and their national compliance person said, pretty sure we got it. Let me know if we're not. So we'll go charger by charger this year to some that we found that weren't doing that last year. And we will contact him to have things fixed if they're not fixed already.
I'm guessing on mechanical scales and maybe in pumps, and maybe in electrical. Is there a way to trim them if they're off? Can you, do they have ways to sort of like get them back to accurate?
Most commercial weighing and measuring devices can be adjusted. The EVSCs, for the most part, those are not a non-adjustable device. So a lot of times if they're out of tolerance, they either have to go and replace the whole device in some of the older ones, or some of the new ones have basically it's a circuit board that they can go in and change out. So again, it's just a replacing a part.
Yeah.
And again, the industry now, there are standards, more things are getting built that way. So it can be adjusted. You can do all those basic things, trimmed or added to, whatever it needs to be to make it accurate.
For the committee's purpose and for the public, then the presentation that Scott's referring to is now on the committee webpage under Steve Collier.
Now, it does have a picture of the testing equipment in it that we're using now. And if you guys are bringing it up, I can talk you through the picture a little bit just so you know what you're looking at.
I'm not sure if there's a way to get it to you or to get it online, but we're one of those committees that lost their committee assistant, but they're working hard to cover that.
There
And
are some issues we don't want to get into it.
Those things too, don't worry.
That's not what we told her.
Yeah, so on slide 2, there's a photograph just to kind of give you an idea of what. And if you guys would like to see this in operation, we're more than willing to, again, schedule a time where we can be outside, we can do a charger right nearby and everybody can come and watch the testing happen. Is everybody on to slide 2 now with the photo on it? Okay, so in that picture, you see there's a black box on the left. That is the actual testing equipment. So that measures the power coming from the EVSE and then going to the unit on the right, which is a charge emulator. We normally just call it a toaster because it's just turning the electricity into heat. Because unlike a gas pump, or if you're using aggregate in like a hopper scale, you can't put the material back in this case. So the energy has to be burned off so it doesn't destroy the equipment. So that is the DC level, the AC level 2 equipment. The DC level 2 equipment level 3 equipment will be very similar. The tester will look the same, but the load emulator is about 35 times bigger. It's 350 pounds. You need a forklift to move it around. It doesn't even fit into our trucks with a cap. So as we pass it from inspector to inspector, we're actually gonna have to take the caps and stuff off the truck and strap it down and all those things as we do it. So that's what, yeah.
So what is the variance that's allowed in a gas pump?
In a gas pump, it's 0.5%.
Right, okay, and in a propane meter?
Like a commercial home delivery, that's 1%.
Okay, so explain to me why 2% is allowed in electricity.
That was a national standard that was adopted. I mean, obviously, there are different people doing and there is discussion this year. We are actually I'm part of will be part of a committee that we're going to be sending out a survey to all the people testing these things nationally to see if the 2% is an effective tolerance. My guess is it will be tightened a little bit in the long run, but that's just where they chose to start because they thought it was a nice balance, especially given all the legacy equipment that was in before this standard was adopted.
Thank you.
is there a plan to deal with that legacy equipment for how long? Because I gathered earlier that we don't want to shut off charging.
Yes, exactly. So there will
what their tolerance is or whatnot. How does that?
So as long as what we try to do again, as long as it's accurate and correct to the consumer, and the consumer there's no potential to facilitate fraud, most of that legacy equipment will be allowed to exist until the end of its active life cycle, right? Until it wears out. And that's kind of the plan from now. It'll have to be licensed and tested every year, just like everything else. But that's kind of the plan for the legacy equipment, to keep as much open as possible. while also providing assurance to the consumer that they're getting what they paid for.
Do you have an estimate of when you'll have the level 3 sort of, tested out, I guess, and actually out trying it for the first time?
So as soon as the contract is done and signed, I've talked to the Tesco representative. He said that right now, if we get the order in soon, it's a less than a 6-week wait on the equipment. So as soon as the contract is signed, we should have it in 4 to 5 weeks, and then we'll start using it immediately. So that's right now, we're just waiting on the contracts.
And how long will it be like a level 3 or a level 2? How long does it take?
Level 2 takes about a half hour. And again, one of the things they did this year was they actually changed the standard test. Up till last year, it was 2 tests, one a full load test, and then one basically at 10% of the capacity of the device. This year, they changed it to 3 tests. Again, maximum capacity, basically 60% and 30%. It actually takes a little less time this year because we're getting more power at a time, so it takes less time. The DC ones, we don't know because it will all depend how much power we can push through it, how quickly. Because the tests are all based on a minimum measured quantity, right? You have to push at least so much through before it's considered valid.
Are you putting a sticker on?
Yes, you'll see. As I said, if you go down here across the street, the ones we were able to test, you will see stickers on. The other issue we're finding with just some of the background issues we're seeing with EVL level 2 is sometimes people go and they plug in all day. So it's not like a gas pump where somebody's going to fill up their pump and then they're gone and you can sneak in between the next customer. And there are some occasions, especially in Chittenden County, where one of our inspectors has been out, where basically a charger is almost someone's exclusive, like it's technically available to the public, but it's basically one person's private charger because it's near their work. They go and they park there every morning and they charge all day. So these are things where we're like, okay, can we go out early and try to get it? After hours, this or that, but that's of course balancing inspectors' time and actual life around their work to try to make sure we get to these things. But those are problems we're seeing as well. That shouldn't be as much of a problem with DC Fast, even if you're waiting 15 or 20 minutes. That's not an unreasonable amount of time to wait for a device that can open, test, and inspect.
Are those all level 2 chargers right here?
Everything out here is level 2.
It only takes half an hour to charge the whole car.
No, level 2, it will take, I used to know these numbers. You get 30 miles of range for every hour of charging, give or take. So if you plug in for an hour.
So it does take all day.
Those will take 6 to 8 hours to charge your car completely. The level 1, which is basically just plugging it into an outlet in the wall, could take more than 24 hours to charge your whole car. You basically get 3 to 5 miles of range for every hour of charging. The DC Fast give you 80% of your range in 15-ish minutes, plus or minus, depending on again, they're all different, right? They all have different wattage capacities. So it all depends, and it depends how fast your car can take the charge, because some of the smaller cars have to charge slower because they have a smaller battery that goes blown up.
I thought maybe they were hoarding the chargers and somebody else could use them at noon or something, but it takes all day anyway, so I guess they gotta plug it all day. Okay.
Well, they shut down gasoline stations so they can do the testing. I don't know why you wouldn't be able to do it.
Well, so we try not to shut stations down. When we do the testing of gas pumps, we actually work in and out of customers. So we try to, again, be as friendly as with business because if we're closing them down for say 2 hours to do their test, that's 2 hours of lost sales that we would prefer not to have them lose. And obviously stores are there and gas stations are there as EV chargers are there for people's convenience, right? So it behooves the public to be able to use them.
Just a quick question on your operation. When a car is parked at level 2 charging station all day and they have completed their charge, are you all able to unplug that car?
We can physically. By policy, we have chosen not to do that yet. Even though the charge is complete, just out of courtesy. That may change in the future, but as of now, we have made the conscious choice. No, if somebody's plugged in, even if the charge is complete, we're not going to be messing with it.
So if we're looking at, we're not going to be back until January as far as our group goes, and you've got 53 licensed and 167 plus people out there that probably may or may not need to be, and you got this level 3 equipment. What will success or confidence in the program or whatever it may be in relationship to your area, this entire electric network that we're trying to build out, what should we be looking for and expecting come January if we?
Well, my hope is we will be doing more EV test, like actually testing more EV chargers than we did last year, which I think that shouldn't be a problem because we have a longer time span to do it in this year. We're going to do our best to license it for the licensing, but as Steve said, it's kind of because of those definitions, it's a little bit squishy as to who really needs to license. So we're going to go after the ones that are obvious, but then there'll be ones that are less obvious that we have to wait on for licensing. So we're kind of going to have to wait and see on that one. Once we get a nice clear line, we will go out and enforce that nice clear line as to our best of our ability. And we should get to, I would expect, quite a large chunk of the EV level 3 or DC level 3 chargers out there because there's not as many.
They're not very many.
You feel like you know where all the chargers are in the state of Vermont?
No.
Whether they're commercial or not?
No, I mean, there is a federal list. That's what we've started with, and they usually go on the list when and that's what we're downloading every month or two as we kind of want to update things. But it does help when we have the waste and service reports from the people that are installing these. Or actually, Tesla sent us an email this morning. They want their people now licensed because obviously they're realizing everything is moving forward. So we should start seeing more and more of those, which helps us know where they are to start with, and also who owns them. You'd be very surprised at how many people we go to that don't actually know they own these devices. The first few people we talked to said, "Oh, ChargePoint owns that," and we dialogued directly with ChargePoint. ChargePoint owns no chargers in the state of Vermont. So it took a few months for some people to even come around to the fact that they owned the device that was on their property, which is that was a whole other new thing for us.
Yeah. So if I go up to a charge point out here and I pay it with my app or however I pay it, those funds are going to the state of Vermont, I assume.
Yes,
They're chargers.
Yeah, so those are all owned by BGS. So ChargePoint will take some sort of operation fee because they're obviously the throughput, the processor of the transaction. And then some of that goes back to the state of Vermont, just like it would for anybody privately owned. There's been a couple schools that have contacted me again, just about like what they can do with pricing, because they have the ability to control most of their pricing. And you guys had mentioned tax earlier. This year, we have seen ChargePoint is collecting a 6% sales and use tax on all the energy sold now. I have a question out to the tax department to whether that is correct or not.
Yeah.
And I haven't gotten that answer back yet, but that's what we've seen so far this year. And again, that is not our issue to enforce if it is in fact the wrong thing, but I will put the tax department in connection with the correct person at ChargePoint if that fixed, if it does in fact turn out to be the wrong amount to be charged.
I hadn't thought about a sales tax on it.
Yeah, again,
There's no sales tax on gasoline.
this
That's not paying the gas tax, then you have to pay the sales tax.
yes, and so those are questions for the tax department, not me. I asked the tax department because I wasn't sure, because this didn't seem like the proper use of a sales tax to me, but it's not my rule to enforce, so I just wanted to ask the question. So if it is, I can document stuff and hand them things to then go forth with their follow-up.
Just further on that, so the assumption, if ChargePoint is collecting a 6% sales tax, then that should be going to state revenue,
I would assume.
assuming, yeah.
Does anybody have any other questions?
No, other than, sounds like we should be looking into the statutes to make sure, what we want is actually happening. Because, at some point, we might be looking at transportation tax on charging.
Certainly a level 3 would be good revenue.
So as far in addition to that part about coming back for 2025, so the agency of agriculture has a role, and then ACCD has a role, and the transportation has a role. Is that work?
We're all learning to work together, and it's everybody's got different things. And again, we all have different things that we're supposed to be doing. And we understand that, like, again, they're trying to get stuff out there so people have it to charge. And we're trying to, again, make sure it meets some sort of standard so the consumer can be assured they're getting what they want. Trying to keep as much open as we can, but also try to make sure all the new stuff does actually meet the standards as it should when it goes in the ground. And yeah, there's lots of moving pieces and lots of communication with lots of different people, and some people are more receptive than others as to everything. And as Steve said, I guess we are on education first, right? We always try to ask, like, tell and ask. If we get compliance that way, it's fantastic because it's so much easier. If we don't, then there's paperwork.
Okay. Anybody have anything else?
This was good.
All right. We thank you, gentlemen, very much for coming in.
Thank you.
This morning, and appreciate that. As far as committee goes, I guess you already got your claps. That's all you're gonna get. We are not listed for, or we've got 4 this afternoon. We do not have anything else listed on the agenda right this minute, but I did mention to you that there are sort of potential amendments being discussed to our, which we haven't presented, our miscellaneous motor vehicles. That'll be on Tuesday, but be aware you may get a text or an email update. If we have to hear an amendment in committee, we would have to do that potentially tomorrow, or maybe sometime this afternoon after floor, if the floor is not too long, or tomorrow we will squeeze it in right after floor, right before, depending on if we have to hear it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the timing of it, usually the amendments don't show up until Tuesday, so I would think probably plan on a 9 o'clock Tuesday as opposed to 10.
So
We'll know.
Amendments.
Yeah, for the amendments, yeah.
if,
Okay.
and that's all still an if.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
just have it in the back of your mind that maybe we gotta be here at 9 on Tuesday instead of or whatever, before 4. We may have to meet.
Yeah.
Okay, and anything else with this? Representative what?
I just have a question on our DMV floor report on Tuesday. So.
Then we can do that